This is the Portuguese Air Force of the 90s. Since its creation in 1952, this branch of the armed forces has been equipped with a large number of different aircraft. Some distinguish themselves, either by their large number of flying hours or by their time of service in their respective squadrons. Very few have, however, reached the status of the Fiat G-91. In 1994, after 28 years of service and 75,000 flying hours, many of them in combat, its life cycle officially ended, but not its memory. The 60s. Portugal was involved in conflicts with the liberation movements in its colonies in Africa. Military personnel and armament were massively deployed from Europe to Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea. The vast distances between both continents required sea and air routes to be used, and gradually the Air Force, even though ill-equipped, was given one of its first missions in these conflicts: the transportation of human and material resources. In Africa, each colony presented different geographical and military problems. and the most common one was the absence of forces in the field, mostly inland. In order to prevent the almost total freedom of movement of the guerrilla and to reinforce the control of several strategic points, the Portuguese army sent columns with the purpose of establishing lines of communication, therefore ensuring their effectiveness and security, as well as mounting bases that could be used to control the surrounding areas. Soon the military situation required air power in order to support the troops involved in an increasing number of operations in the field. The Portuguese Air Force assets were few at the time. Many aircraft were obsolete or not proper for those missions and environment. New aircraft were bought and added to the inventory, but it became more and more difficult to buy armament, since this was denied to Portugal due to the sanctions imposed by the United Nations. It was against this background that the Air Force operated in Africa. Each day at air bases and in skies was built upon the effort and sacrifice of men with a high sense of duty. Pilots, maintenance, and other personnel were perfectly aware of the importance an aircraft had for those who were fighting in the field and feeling its presence. In those days, for many soldiers in the heart of Africa, the arrival of a helicopter brought them a breath of life. And the landing of a small Do-27, a contact with the world. From 1966 onwards, and after prolonged contacts that made it possible to avoid embargoes, the first Fiat G-91 arrived first in Guinea, then in Mozambique, and finally in Angola. This new aircraft closed the cycle of the obsolete F-84 and were used instead of the F-86 Sabre, initially requested, but whose operation in the African theater was forbidden to Portugal. Though the Fiat G-91 was therefore a replacement, it was not, however, a bad omen. On the contrary, it became almost a legend. Built in 1956 in Turin and used on that occasion by several air forces from countries like Italy, the Federal Republic of Germany, and Greece, it was, however, in Portuguese hands that it got its first and only baptism of fire. In the African campaign, this aircraft turned out to be a very effective weapon, easy to service, and with a great flexibility for the roles it was used for. The Fiat G-91 was fired upon by different anti-aircraft weapons, chased by Strela ground-air missiles, and yet very seldom shot down, and on only one occasion was the pilot killed. This turned out to be the proof of excellence of the pair pilot aircraft. The Fiat G-91 became a symbol in Africa, its presence hated or welcomed, but never indifferent. But its most important role was, besides its effectiveness in combat, the raising of morale among those who served in the Air Force with such an aircraft. On the 25th of April 1974, there was a revolution in Portugal. Soon, the Elvor agreements dictated the end of war and the cession of the former colonies to the liberation movements. New countries were born. But in Angola and Mozambique, the struggle for power violently broke out. People began to leave, and the Air Force was confronted with the huge task of helping a civilian air bridge at the same time all its military forces were being deactivated, and military equipment and personnel were being sent back to Portugal. In the following months, the Portuguese Air Force sent back the Fiat G-91 and started to concentrate them at Air Base 6 at Montijo, near Lisbon. The fleet was then organized in accordance with NATO requirements. and in August 1974, Squadron 62, nicknamed Jaguars, was formed. Aircraft were refitted and reconditioned so that they could in future better respond to missions in the European theater. In 1978, that squadron was given the present call name, Squadron 301, and in August 1980 started with a deployment to the Azores, which later received the name of Squadron 303, Tigers, whose mission was the air defense of the Azores Air Command and maritime patrol of the exclusive economic zone. After their return to the mainland, several further units were bought. In order to be always updated and to improve their capabilities, Squadron 301 participated in many national and NATO exercises, such as Display Determination, Cold Fire, Dawn Patrol, Ardent Ground, Locked Gate, Ocean Safari, Open Gate, and Tiger Meet. An airplane is not just a piece of equipment, systems, and material. It is mainly an extension of the man, a machine that lives and acts according to man's will. The Fiat G-91 was a unique aircraft in the history of the Portuguese Air Force. Around it, a very special world was created, with a contagious spirit of its own for everyone who came in touch with it. That world and that spirit are still alive.